title of this episode is Adnan's Goats. This is being recorded October 4th, 2022. It occurred in the springtime and summer of about 2012 at TOK America, a Japanese high-purity chemical company in Hillsboro, Oregon. This involved me. I'm Jack Lynch. I was the manager of developer department, also known as DV, and a man named Adnan Sher. He's a Pakistani guy that was working with our crew out there. It also involved Mike Lindsay, the senior vice president of TOK America. It involved Patty Lynch, my wife. It also involved a good portion of my crew that were Mexican that worked in the DV department, both day and swing shift. Seems that we had a big field out and back, 15 acres or so. When the company was built a couple decades ago, it was built in this very large field, agricultural area. They built up part of that area in manufacturing and left the field there, which required us to hire someone to mow it several times a year. If you didn't mow it and take care of it, the brush would grow. And if the brush grew or the grass got too long, code compliance for the county would get after you, and you could end up getting a sizable fine for not taking care of it. It's in the code. Time had gone by. Yeah, we got caught for not keeping the grass mowed down and the blackberries from growing up the way they were. We went to the meeting, we got talked to about it, and we promised that we would take care of it. We didn't know exactly how, but we'd take care of it. About that time, Mike Lindsay and my direct boss, Bruce Aeh, and I were walking along looking at that field a little bit, trying to figure out what to do. I was half joking. I'd had a side job with Metro, of the regional government, and they'd been known to hire herds of goats. This is like 200, 300 goats to go into a large fielded area in the county or in the city of Portland and eat down all the brush. It was a good environmental way. It looked really good to everybody too. And I made the joke, well, why don't we get some goats and put them back in the field? I was kidding. My boss and Mike Lindsay, the big boss, said, well, Jack, can you get the goats? And I realized the jig's up. It's not a joke anymore. I said, I think I can. Adnan Sher that works in our department, he keeps goats, and I bet he'd want to bring them out here to let them run around. They says, well, talk to him. How do you think we can do it? I said, well, we'll put a fence around, a little portable fence around one batch of blackberries there and let the goats live in there. When they've got that eaten down, we'll move the fence over to the next bunch and have them eat that. We'll have to probably rent a mower, a riding mower, to do the rest of the field. But once all the blackberries are pretty well eaten down, we should be able to get the grass to grow and start mowing in there. They said, great, let's do it. So I talked to Adnan. He was more than happy to. He was just tickled to be able to have a place for his goats. He lived out near Forest Grove and didn't have a lot of room in his yard, but he had 5-6 goats. Within a couple of days, the goats were in that back field of TOK America. And we put the fence up, and the goats started eating the grass and eating the weeds. They weren't very interested in the blackberries. That was an old patch, and an awful lot of it was dead blackberry brush. There's some live there, but goats weren't real happy about it. So I figured we probably need to go in there by hand with machetes and chop that brush back so the goats could get into it and eat the tender stuff. That wasn't to happen for a while. But the goats were out in that field, in their little enclosed area. Everybody at TOK, in the office, the other departments, the engineers, everybody knew the goats were there, and they were dropping by to visit them, to see them. They'd pull up hunks of grass, hand it through the fence, and the goats would gratefully just eat it right out of their hands. Patty, my wife, thought the goats needed a treat. She stopped over at Costco, and she bought a big bulk bag of carrots. I think it was a 25-pound bag. Figured the goats would probably eat them right up and just be tickled. Patty came out one morning around 11 o'clock. I walked back there to the goats with her. She just loved watching them. She got out the carrots, went over to the fence, held them out. The goats came over, sniffed the carrots, didn't want anything to do with them. That was my first lesson about goats. No, goats will not eat anything. They don't eat tin cans. They're not interested in paper, and they do not like carrots. Strike one. People kept coming to visit the goats, though. The Mexicans that were in my department liked them. One of the goats was a nanny that was in milk. The Mexicans had never milked a goat, but they thought they could do it. They thought they'd get some milk, something to put in their coffee. It'd probably be pretty good. I thought that's a great idea. I wasn't told about it in advance. One afternoon when day shift was over and swing shift was just starting, I walked out back to walk around to see what's going on around the plant, make sure everything's okay. Right next to the back door for our DV department was a group of 6 of these Mexican folks. And they're excited and they're holding on to this goat. One was holding him around the neck, another one was around their shoulders, another one was in the back there trying to hold him down, another one was underneath her trying to milk her, and then the last one was right behind getting kicked in the nuts because that goat was not happy. It didn't like being covered in people and restrained. The Mexicans understood that. They didn't want to upset the goat. You wouldn't get milk out of him if it was too upset, so they kept working. It was the funniest thing I ever saw. Every time I think of it, I just cuss myself for not having got my phone out and gotten a video of this. It would have been wonderful. But the goat's struggling. The Mexicans are getting a little bit. And after 15 minutes or so, they did come up with about half a cup. They brought it in, put it in the refrigerator, and they were going to have that with their coffee the next morning. And they did. They were proud. They'd done a good job. But they weren't interested in going back to that goat a second time. They'd had enough. They'd worked hard enough for what little they got. Time went on. Everybody's coming to visit the goats. Now it wasn't just the people at work that worked there. It was their friends and family that were being brought around to see these goats that we had. They'd come to visit, they'd look, they'd pull out some more weeds or whatever, and the goats would eat them. Life was good for everybody. It was fun. It was a nice thing. Our customers that come by would be brought out to see what we were doing. Everyone was proud of how we were doing the green thing to take care of the weeds. Mike Lindsay had 2 young daughters, and he brought them out one afternoon. I wasn't there to see it. I was there for the aftermath. I was told that they'd walked down the back roadway over to where the goats were. They were looking out, and one of his girls said, "Daddy, Daddy, what's wrong with those 3 goats?" 3 goats were out in that field, laying on their backs. In military terms, we call that tits up. They were bloated, they weren't moving. It was very obvious they were dead. Mike didn't want his girls to be too upset about this whole thing. So he told them, "Oh, kids, darlings, nothing wrong with those goats. They're just sunning themselves. It's so warm and nice out here today. They're sleeping with their tummies in the air." A few minutes after that, they walked off. Mike separated himself from the girls, called me on the phone and said, "Jack, there's 3 dead goats back there. Get them out of there right away. Don't put them in the dumpster. Get them off the property and away from here. Get rid of the other goats too. We can't have any more of this." "Yes, boss. We'll take care of it right away." I went and got a hold of Adnan, the guy that brought the goats. Told him what Mike had seen. We went back and there were the 3 goats. Tango Uniform, bellies in the sun. It was a good thing because Adnan got rid of those 3 goats. He took them home. I don't know if he butchered them, sold them, or buried them, or stuck them in someone's cans. I didn't ask. I didn't want to know. The other goats that he had, they left within the week. And then came time when Adnan left employment at TOK America. It was several months after the goat incident. He took a job with the U.S. government as an interpreter back in the Middle East where our troops were deployed. He'd go out with the troops and he would translate both directions. He understood English language quite well because he'd spent a few years with us at TOK and all the stuff that we saw and did and told him about. And after he was gone a while, one of the guys in the next door department, the CS department, says, "Do you know what Adnan was doing with those goats?" I says, "Yeah, he was running them in the back field there and growing them." He said, "Nope." I said, "Okay, you tell me what he was doing." He said, "Have you ever heard of money laundering, where someone steals a big pile of money and they find a way to trade that for money that isn't marked or isn't involved in the crime?" I says, "Yeah, money laundering is a kind of a common crime." He said, "Well, Adnan was doing a similar thing. He was goat laundering." "You mean he was getting goats that probably weren't his?" He says, "Yeah, he was getting goats. People were bringing them into him, and he was buying them cheap or getting them for free. He'd put them in with the herd of goats that we had here at TOK America. And there they'd sit and they'd eat and they'd grow a little bit bigger for a few months. And the ones that had been there the longest, every now and then he'd pull one out and he'd sell it. He'd get another new goat, put it into the herd, another real old goat, go out and sell it too." I said, "He'd been doing that the whole time?" They said, "Yeah."